Welcome. The topic for this video is how to add employees into SBC. Now, I want to tell you that when you're adding employees into the system, the only employees that actually need to have a clerk code, that's a unique code into the system, are those employees who are going to be accessing things like point of sale, purchase orders, taking payments, and so on. The only exception to that is if you plan to use the time clock file. If you plan to have your employees clock in through SBC, then every single employee in the building needs to have their own unique clerk code. Otherwise, people like drivers or warehouse people really don't need to be in SBC because they're not using the system at all. So I'm going to start by going into General Files, letter T, and then number 4, miscellaneous files, and finally letter I, employee information file. So as you look at the menu, you'll notice that it is very similar to how you add parts manually into your inventory or how you add accounts into your AR, by number 1 being the add to file and number 2 being the delete from file. However, number 5, set up employee and CCSR files, is typically what we teach people to use when they're setting up SBC, because this not only adds your employee into the system, but it adds a record into the clerk sales recap files. That's the information. It's a screen that looks very similar to your sales recap, only it's split up by clerk, and a clerk in our system is defined as a person who would go into point of sale and create a sale. It is not a salesman. It's not the person who necessarily gets credit for the sale. It's the person who makes the sale. So I'm going to start by going into number 5, set up employee and CCSR files. And I may get this question, enter store number for CCSR. You have the ability to create your clerk sales recap report by location. Depending on how many locations that you have and whether your employees share stores, perhaps they work at store A on Mondays and store B on Tuesdays, you'll determine whether or not this is something that would work for you. I'm going to press the enter key, and it's going to ask me for my clerk code. Now, this is asking me for my clerk code initially because I am the person with the administrative level to get in here and add new employees and to change their security levels. So I'm going to type in my clerk code. If your clerk code does not work or you don't have a clerk code, ask your system administrator or call SBC for help. All right, so what you're seeing here is the way that we're going to set up the employees that are going to be added into the employee file and also into that clerk sales recap table. So the first thing it's going to ask me is for an employee code. Many moons ago, this was the social security number for the customer or for the employee. However, since now giving out your social security number is more questionable, you can enter any code in here that will represent this employee, and this code doesn't really mean anything to anybody. It's simply an identifier or a serial number or a sequence number for this particular employee. So when I'm teaching people how to do this, I typically tell them to use the calendar date that it currently is, or if the customer has an employee code through another software product that you use, perhaps your HR department has a special code for the employees, you can use that information. The only thing that is the stipulation here is that it has to be unique. So I'm going to type in today's date, 2016, 11/21, and then I'm going to type in a number 1. That just means that this would be the first employee that I was adding on this particular day. If you plan to add more than 9 employees or more than 10 employees, I'd suggest cutting down your date. So 16, 11, 21, 1, and then you would be able to go all the way to 999. As I said, this number really doesn't mean anything to anybody, and it's not really going to be used anywhere, so it's simply a sequence number for this particular file. This next information is the more important information. So the the employee's clerk code is the 2 or 3 digit code that's going to print out on your invoices. It prints out on your reports. It prints out on any tattletale reports, meaning they've made a change to the inventory, they made a change in point of sale, and you wanted to get an audit trail of what changes were made. So this clerk code is going to identify this person throughout SBC. So typically we use their 3-character initials. I'm going to type in my initials here. And then their hidden clerk key is their password, if you will, to get into menus in the SBC. Now, let me just change directions here for 1 second. When you first click on the icon, you're going to be at a password screen. That password is a generic password, typically used, most customers typically use the same code for all of the clerk terminals. The administrators most of the time would have all of the same codes. The AR department would use the same code. The warehouse would all use the same code, and it brings you to different menu screens for what you do all day, or that are most appropriate for what you do all day. This is the identifier for when you go into point of sale, when you go into the reporting screens. It's not only allowing you in there, whether or not you're allowed to get into any of those menus, it also determines how much security that you have, whether it's open and you can do anything you want, or whether we lock you out of doing things like updating your inventory, using the stuffing programs and things like that. So this is an up to 3-character hidden clerk key that represents me as a person, not my particular job description. So I'm going to type in a hidden clerk key. Now that hidden clerk key must be unique. So if I try to type in one that already exists, I'm going to get a message at the bottom that says that I already have an employee who's using that 1, 2, 3 clerk key and that I need to change it. So it's going to make me press the enter key. I'm going to type back in that 545. Now this hidden clerk key can be changed at any time. So if someone finds out about a hidden clerk key and you want to change it, you can absolutely change it at any time. I'm going to type in my name. Now my security level is something that your system administrator would have given you perhaps a list of what all of the valid security levels are. SBC has customers who have hundreds of employees, so we needed to give a wide range of security levels. So our security level goes from 0 to 99. However, if you've got 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 people in your business, there's no reason for you to set up every single number. You would grab a couple of those numbers and you would set them up for the employee type. So please speak with your system administrator about what the valid numbers are that you are going to use. If you don't know what those are, please call SBC and we can help you out. So I'm going to assume that when I'm setting up this particular employee that I need the least amount of security. This is going to be a clerk who's using point of sale. So I'm going to leave that as a 0 and I can change it at any time. The last question is, what's my social security number? Again, we don't track that for any reason. We don't need it for any reason. If you'd like to put the person's social security number in there, you can. Most of the time the HR has this in a different location, so it's completely unnecessary. And once you've added all of the important information, you're going to Control W, and that's now added me into the system as an employee and me into the clerk sales recap file. I'm going to press the escape key and I'm going to go up to number 3, press my enter key, type in my clerk code. Again, I'm the administrator going in to set this up, so this is my clerk code. And then I'm going to type in that employee code that I entered, 161121.1, press my enter key, and here's my record. Now, your buttons at the bottom will let you scroll around. If you don't remember what the employee code is that you entered, you can always just press your F1 and F2 keys to scroll. You can also press your F6 key to set up a scan if you're looking for a specific clerk that was added on a particular day or that has an address that you want to search for or something along those lines. And at that point, you'd use the F3 and F4 scans to scan around to find only people who match that criteria. So my employee code is the one that I entered. My clerk key is that 545. My clerk code is JMM. Now your clerk key is your hidden password, remember. So if you find out that an employee has someone else's clerk key and that they're using it for nefarious reasons, you can come in here and change those clerk keys at any time. It's not such a big deal when when an employee with a security level of 0, his clerk key is kind of well known, because other than him being blamed for doing price overrides when he perhaps shouldn't, or giving people discounts, or deleting hold tickets in point of sale if employees with a 0 security level are being allowed to use that, there's nothing really confidential that a person that's at a security level 0 is able to share with another employee who's at a security level 0. The people that you really want to make sure that you keep their clerk key private would be any administrators, anybody with a security level of a 49 or a 99. You want to make sure that if one of the employees finds out what their clerk key is, you go in and change that. So I'm going to press my F9 key just to edit, and my cursor starts on that clerk key. I can change it at any time. If my clerk code changed, maybe I got married or got divorced, I can change my clerk code here. The rest of the information on the screen is really unnecessary. You can use it and populate it if you'd like to. There's no reason for you to do this if you are keeping this information with your HR department in another software product. Allow entry into invoicing. The only reason that you would change this particular character is to a no if you don't want anyone going into point of sale. So really, the purpose of SBC is to sell items, to receive money, and to receive purchase orders in. That's the main thing that point of sale systems do. So if for whatever reason you have someone who's dealing with your inventory, maybe it's a warehouse guy, but he doesn't belong in invoicing and you don't want him to have the opportunity to even go in there and mess around, you can change this flag to a no, and then he won't be allowed in invoicing. We assume that everyone is allowed into invoicing, so if you leave that as a blank or you put in a yes, either one, the employee will be allowed into invoicing. Miscellaneous code, department code, those are simply, and actually these routing information fields over here, these are simply fields that you can use to filter your employees. So if you have that many employees and you wanted to set them up by store that they work at or by department code, for reporting purposes, you can do that here. Again, none of this is required. The security level is the one that you can come in here and you can change to. Please be aware that you cannot give someone a security level that's higher than your own. So if your clerk code, when you entered into this screen, is only set to a 49, you cannot set up somebody to be a 99. You're going to have to go to your system administrator and either have them change your security level or let you in with someone with a higher security level. I'm going to press my enter key. And the last thing that you see here is valid point of sale stores. In the case that you have so many stores that you want to limit which stores that this employee is allowed to work at or is allowed to access for point of sale, you can enter that information here. This would be the store ID that's off of your GEOG record. If you have no reason to do this, simply leave this blank. And then update it by clicking on the update button. So once you have the information in here, unless the person's clerk key needs to change or their clerk code needs to change or they've gotten married or divorced and their last name has changed, there's no reason for you to really access any of this information. When I press the escape key, you've got the same screens as you have in other locations. Employee custom reports, you can run reports on any of this information if you'd like to. Perhaps you're sending out holiday cards or something and you'd like to track the employees' addresses. There's really not a lot of reasons that you would go into custom reports, but you can. Number 9 is the same number 9 that you'll see in other locations in the system. It gives you the opportunity to sort the reports. So the difference between number 4 and number 9 is simply the sorting. In the case that you have an employee who's never going to be in point of sale and you want to set them up, you absolutely can use the add to field. And this is simply asking for that code, that date field that I entered, the 16/11/21. So when you come in here, if you just want to add the employee this way, just add in that up to 9 character code and then go into screen number 3 and adjust the information. So the last thing that I said was that when you enter the employee in number 5, you're also adding them to your clerk sales recap. So if I press the escape key a couple of times and I go into number 2, I'm going to see clerk performance reports in letter B. When I go into clerk sales recap and letter A, you're going to see that now it's going to ask me for that store if I have it separated by store. I type in my clerk code again, and then I can type in the clerk key, 545, and here is a new clerk sales recap page ready to collect any information for any of the tickets that clerk JMM creates through point of sale. So you will occasionally want to come in here and make sure that your clerk keys and clerk codes are all added in here in the case that you have an employee who perhaps was added initially. They worked in the warehouse, so they didn't need to track their sales, and they moved to the counter to sell out a point of sale. You're going to want to come in here and add those people. You do that by clicking on the F10 key that will add a new employee. If you click on the help here, you can see all of the help screen information. And if I were to come in here and just add a clerk code that doesn't exist, you'll see the F10 key right here to add a new record. If you have any questions on any of this, please call SBC at 800-829-4722 or send us an email at sbctraining@autolog.com. Thank you for your time.